For our 9.1 notes, we are going to be talking about equations and how to write them. So let's start with what is an equation. So an equation is when you're taking two expressions. So we've talked about expressions. This is the problem we're doing, and your answer and the problem are going to equal each other. And it doesn't always have to be an answer, right? I could say 4 plus 7 equals, it's 11. I could say 10 plus 1. That's an equation. It just has to be the same and balanced on both sides. So an equation includes an equal sign and shows that two expressions are equivalent. So has the equal sign, and it's taking this expression and this expression and saying they are equal to each other. So whether you solve them out or just looking at each thing separately, they mean the same thing. They're going to come up with the same answer. So the solution to an equation is a value that makes the equation true. So if I had 2 plus 3, the solution would equal 5. I could also say something like 2 times 3 equals 6. And I could say 2 times 3 equals 5 plus 1. So solution is just something that makes it true, the answer to it. So if we were writing an equation for this problem down here, there are 40 people in a class. Today there were only 27 people in class. Write an equation to show how many people were absent. So I'm going to look through this so I know there are 40 people. That's a total. So there are 40 people total. So go ahead and circle that, box it, and write that that's the total. And today there are only 27 people there today. So there should be 40. Okay, so I know that's my total is 40. But I know today there's only 27 of them. And it wants to know how many people were absent. So yes, I can solve this right now, but we're not going to just solve it yet. We're going to show how would you do that. So I don't just want the answer. We're writing an equation, an algebraic equation, to show what would you do. So I'm going to say A for absent. So these are the absent people. So there's a lot of ways that I could write this. So I can see that when I do 27 and the absent people, put those together, that should equal 40. So I could do 27 plus A equals 40. I could also do A plus 27 is 40. That commutative property can flip them back and forth. Or I could make this a subtraction problem. The opposite of add is of subtract. So every equation can be written in two different ways. They're just the opposites of each other. I could also say that 40 minus 27, so if I take away the 27 people that were there, that should equal the people that are absent. I could also say that 40 minus 27 equals, whoops, that was the exact same way. Sorry, that is not what I meant to say. I could say that 40 minus the absent people equals the 27 people that are there. That's right, so I could write this addition one and flip it, or I could write it as a subtraction problem a couple different ways as well. So there's not just one right answer, but I could not multiply these and I can't divide them. So there is a right answer, but there can be more than one. So for our next part on these 9.1 notes, I just want to talk about some keywords as you are reading story problems that you can look for. So some of my ones that I want to look for, might say all together, or it's going to say this and this, or there are this many more. Let's see, so right, I'm putting them together, this and this. I could combine them, increase, and these are a sum. So these are just a few here that mean add. So if you'll pick 3 or 4 of those to write down. So those are just a few of the ones, and there's more, right? But these are just, if I can think of, oh, that's like this word. It asks me how many are there in all. It's kind of like how many are there all together. So once we know a few, we can connect them to other ones. So some of our subtraction ones are if there is a difference, right? What is the difference between these? You could do fewer. It might ask you how many are left. So it might ask that question, how many are left? It could reduce or decrease, so it's getting smaller. You could describe how many remain. So there's just a few. So difference, how many are left, fewer, reduce, remain, all of those mean to subtract. So if you'll pick 3 or 4 of those to write down on your notes. Okay, and then we've got multiply. So when we hear that word of, that's a really good keyword that it means to multiply. You've got 2 groups of this. I want 1/3 of this. Right? I want this of this other number. So just because it says of doesn't always mean multiply. When it's of a number, that's a good clue. If it asks for the product, that is multiplication answer. And when you are doing repeated groups, those mean to multiply. You're doing the same thing over and over again. There's also words like twice or double. I'm going to double that, times it by 2. It's twice as much, right? That means 2 times 2. There's also words like triple, right? That means times 3. So those, kind of thinking about what do those words mean there. Okay, so pick about 3 or 4 of those to write down. So maybe write down the ones that you haven't heard or aren't as familiar with. If you know that together means to add them, maybe don't write that one down. Write down one you're not familiar with. Okay, and then our dividing words, when we are putting in groups, when we want to share equally, if you put something in half, right, that's going to mean divide by 2. If I cut something in half, when we hear the word per, there are this many per group, or per day, per hour, that means to divide. And if it asks for the quotient is an answer to a division problem. So pick 3 or 4 of those, maybe ones that you have a harder time remembering. So on each of these, 3 or 4 that you want to work on remembering, and write them down so you have those to go back and refer to as you are working.